Welcome everybody. My name is Vicky and I'm going to be your trainer for this unit for Certificate 4 in Youth Work. The unit we are commencing tonight, which runs for 2 weeks, is CHCPRT025 in your learner's portal. The unit is about reporting abuse, but it's about identifying what abuse is and then reporting that abuse around young people at risk and then children. So tonight we are going to deliver for you a very brief recording. This one is your part 1. And then we're going to move into a longer recording, which will be peers from class. They'll be discussing one of the assessments, which is a role play. And you have 4 tasks in this. Task 1 is quiz, task 2 is a role play, and task 4 is a role play. So role plays are practitioner skills. I'll do a little walkthrough on what assessments are here with this one, but because we only have 2 weeks, you are going to be relying on your other resources that we provide you. So the resources are your learner's guide, a full copy of the slides that we provide for you, the recordings from our classes tonight, 2 recordings, the one I'm doing now, and then part 2 following, where the peers will be doing one of the role plays. And then we'll be unpacking what is abuse, and we'll work together collectively, and we'll have a look at how do we identify that, what types of abuse are there, how do we write our file notes and fill in our incident reports around that. You'll need to do some research around what abuse is, what your legal and ethical responsibilities are, your overarching duty of care, the scope in your role, what you do and what you report up to a supervisor, and then, of course, what the law in your state or territory requires of you. To work as a youth worker, you require a working with children check. So a young person does not have a voice. To have a working with children check or a positive notice to work with children, it is that you are a fit and proper person. So you must report, you have responsibilities. It isn't just about getting that card, it's about understanding the responsibilities that come with holding that card as well. So I just walk you through some of the key learnings around this, so you will get a copy of these slides. Before we start, let's do acknowledgement to country. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the traditional owners of the land where we work, study and live, and pay our respect to elders past, present and future. Hayter Institute of Education, we celebrate the stories, the culture and traditions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders of all communities who also work and live on this land. I'm coming to you from Tarrabalan Bunda land in Queensland, and I would like to extend this acknowledgement out to all of our learners, those who cannot make it to class because of those really competing priorities that you have. And then, of course, any of our learners that attend our classes as well. So this topic will have some trigger points in there for people who may have a lived experience. It talks about the stolen generations as well. And for some people, they have lived through childhood abuse, and we need to make sure that we watch in small parts, that we care for ourselves. If at any time that you feel that you are finding it heavy going, then just pause and wait till you're feeling refreshed to come back in and do your studies. If you think that this is sitting with you uncomfortably, please reach out, call Lifeline on 13 11 14, who are very used to helping students as they're studying work through some of these key topics, to do the work. Sometimes we are facing past experiences as well. It also means that you're going to have an amazing connection and empathy for those survivors as well. So this will be hard for some people, and I just want to let you know ahead of time that watching these videos around the stolen generation can be very confronting. So just some general housekeeping. Take care of yourself while you're studying. This particular unit we cover for 2 weeks and then we move on to a new unit. So tonight people are going to want to jump in and do role plays in week 1. Week 2 we are fully booked for role plays as well. But if you can't do your role plays in classes, then just make a booking with your peers from class. If it doesn't require an assessor to be there in real time, then we give you instructions on how to go about doing all of that for yourself. If it does require an assessor, make sure that you let the learner support officers know, or you can reach out to your trainer, myself as well, and I'll guide you on that in classes. So the assessments and submission dates, there is no penalty whatsoever or set due date. A good guide, though, is when you're studying a certificate for, is that you spend between 7 and 12 hours a week on your studies. So that might mean that if you read for 40 minutes a day and that you give yourself a 2-hour block to go over your resources and your learner's guide and rewatch the recordings and go over the slides, and then make sure that when you're doing your assessments that you just hit save and you go back to it when you can. When you're ready, submit your work. And if, say, for some reason you don't get that on the first attempt, which is very common, it's why we automatically give you 3 attempts, but you can have more attempts open up. If maybe there's 19 questions and you get 18 right, we'll give you feedback and guide you on how to get that 19th one to get you over the line. Some people do pass on the first one, but I don't expect that everyone will. When you get that email, try again, then that's really us encouraging you to keep going. You're almost there. And if there's a gap, after 3 attempts, if our feedback isn't clear for you, then we need to be able to connect with you. We can open up more attempts, as many as you like. You have 12 months to complete this, and inside that 12 months, you have 120 hours of work placement to do, plus another 5 assessment tasks while you are in work placement. So it's when you first start, it's good to ease in, but then after a while, you know your way around, you get to meet some of your new colleagues in the class space, or you get used to watching the recordings and familiar faces. But, there's task 1, week 1, task 2, week 2, task 3, week 3 is a pretty good guide, but that's if you have no other competing priorities. If you're balancing a lot of other things, then you just need to be able to carve out what can I do rather than what can I not do. And the best way to do that is go through your learner's guide, read it from front to back, and make sure that you download that, and then go over to look at the questions and then return back to your learner's guide and find that content that's in there and refer to that to help you with the answers. So some of the slides, there's some really good guidance there, but this is for you to do that work. We don't give you the answers, but you can have an open learner book in front of you, which will guide you. Watch the recording, listen to the discussions in class. Class discussions are very much sector conversations. They're not about the answers to your assessment questions. The answers you will find by going through your learner's guide and reading them to understand. If you're stuck, you can reach out to your learner support officers and ask for some guidance. If it's something they cannot help you with, they'll redirect you back to a trainer on our team. So just an overview of this unit. In the session, we talk about child protection and child abuse, what the legal framework is around that, what are the ethical considerations, child-focused practice and skills. You, as a practitioner, will do role plays to practice those skills. Trauma-informed care and language when we're working with a young person, and responding to potential abuse and harm. What's the next step if a young person discloses? You'll have a demonstration of that with your peers in class tonight. So we went into breakout room, and towards the end of our second recording, and the group will bring back what they thought, what is abuse? What's it look like? What's it feel like? What kind of forms does it come in? What is abuse as well? So at the end of the second recording, you will see your peers come back with that. So by the end of this session, you'll have a better understanding of what the meaning of abuse and neglect is, what types of abuse there can be, how abusers may coerce and manipulate children into keeping an abuse secret. That comes up with the role play. And then some physical and behavioural indicators of abuse. What is it we see? How would we know? What are we looking for? And then children's basic rights in relation to abuse and neglect, and then accessing information about child abuse and neglect. Where do we find that? Going to your own state or territory. The difference between abuse and neglect is abuse is the intentional infliction of harm. Neglect is a failure to protect or provide for a child's needs. In the role play that's following in your second recording, there's two occasions. One could be a report of abuse. There'll be an investigation, but it is presenting as abuse of a 5-year-old child. And the other is the neglect of another parent in that scenario who may fail to protect that 5-year-old child. And that's where some of that ethical dilemma can come in that space. The most vulnerable person and the primary client is always the child. And you as a youth worker have a duty of care that overrides everything. So there is physical, sexual, grooming, psychological and emotional, and neglect. They're the types of abuse. It can happen in school, it can happen in the home, it can happen in any area where a group of young people may be together, and abuse can be sibling to sibling, an unknown person outside of the family, and then also someone inside that family unit known to the family. There's a recording there for you to be able to watch. Like I said, this is really heavy going work. So understanding around what different cultures think is that normal family pattern of behaviour. So they may be diverse. It may be that in this family unit, that's okay. And in this one, it is not. As a parent myself, I was raised one way and then chose to parent a different way. You may really like the way that you were parented. However, you may have different thoughts around parenting your own children. But as a youth worker, if you have your own children, of course, but as a youth worker, there is no misunderstanding. There's no blurred lines. We work under the legislation and the Act, and we report accordingly. Any member of the public can report any potential abuse and start to raise that conversation, make sure that there's a record. There could be an escalation. It may be a one-off thing that you witness, but the more information we report, the more evidence there will be where it is a red flag for those in authority who will investigate. So children from CAL, like culturally and linguistically diverse, different language, maybe different country of origin, were less likely to have contact with the child protection system than a non-CALD child. And when working with children, inclusive spaces that embrace all cultures, we need to create a safe place. If the environment is safe, it helps that person with the energy. With that energy in the room, then they can build rapport, establish some connection and trust. So who are people who abuse and neglect children? These are just examples. And are these claims true or false? Parents or caregivers, child migrant schemes, institutions charged with caring for children, other types of institutions, sporting groups and things like that. Where and who else? Reflect on that question. You know, is there a type? Is there a profile of a particular type of person who would use that power imbalance over a child? So in smaller groups, we would ask you to discuss, but what I want you to do between now and when you have time to study is that I want you to go to this website here, and this is a website about the stolen generation. You're going to get this come through. Watch that recording, but just know that it's a really tragic story. It's definitely part of Australia's history. And that's what intergenerational trauma is about. We identify in our family by our connection and the stories about auntie this or uncle that, and so do the stolen generation. So while this may have happened a long time ago, there are survivors of children who had been forcibly removed from their children and moved away from their culture completely and away from their family, and the people that they tried to go to absolutely had no rights at all. That the government of the day made those decisions and let the churches of the day do that. There have been royal commissions about the abuse that happened in those institutional organisations. There were 1,440 members of different churches who were charged during the Royal Commission, but there were almost 5,000 stories that were submitted, and there's many more that never could tell their story. Louise Milligan did an incredible story around that, and it is on us to have a better understanding around it. You may not have experienced that, or you may not know someone when you're coming into this space to study, but our clients definitely have lived it, may be recovering from it, or may currently still be living with that in their lives. So we need to be that soft place for them to land, the connection and the safe, trusted person to maybe share that story, and know that by sharing that story, we would not betray their trust, but we would make sure that they understood our role is to keep them safe. So the people who abuse and neglect children, you have your protective factors and your risk factors when you're working with young people. So conditions and attributes in a child or a young person's environment that enhance their resilience and reduce the risk of experiencing abuse or neglect, that is what protective factors are. The parent or the caregiver of a child has a legal responsibility to put protective factors around that child. The risk factors increase the likelihood of abuse or neglect. So if we don't have a safe environment and make sure that a young person's basic needs are met, then we're placing them at risk, more vulnerable, and they can easily be targeted by those people who are predatory in nature. So what are some of the indicators? A single indicator is not one thing. So it requires a bit of information, which also is about investigating. So we give you a scenario, a hypothetical about a 5-year-old boy whose mum's ex-partner is involved in that. However, the child discloses in the role play to you, and you will be the worker that they disclose to. So you'll see a couple of our learners tonight, which is Chelsea and Stuart, and they've been good enough to play both the client and the worker as well in that space. So what are some of the skills? Your observation, so what we see, gathering and recording information, just getting that data down, continue to just put that in there. As an isolated incident, perhaps not. And an alarm or a risk, but when you start to see a pattern of behavior, it be an indicator. And then your intentional questioning skills, depending on the age of the child, how do we pitch and ask those questions? So if I was working with say a 5-year-old, like in the role play, I would approach that 5-year-old differently than what I might a 14-year-old that had no other developmental needs or diverse needs as well. So we pitch to what they can understand, not our language that we might use colleague to colleague. So we choose our words carefully, keep our tone gentle. We make sure that we've got them in an environment where they feel safe, because it's really an injury, a psychological injury. It can even be a physical injury as well. So some of the indicators around physical abuse are inconsistent or uh, being absent, so that which is different to school refusal. But bruises, someone keeping a child away so that no one can report. Pressure marks, welts, multiple fractures from different times, or they're just clumsy or excusing that away. Hospitals, teachers, nurses, doctors, are all tier 1 or mandatory reporters. You may work in an organisation where you are a mandatory reporter, but any member of the public can report if they suspect on reasonable grounds and it's not vexatious, where you're just trying to get to somebody. But if you have concerns, raise those concerns. If you've made a mistake, that's a great mistake. There's no abuse. But to not do something, to not take action, you may be able to prevent something. Or signs of poisoning or over medication, and bruises in unusual places as well. Suspicious burns, cigarette lighter burns, things like that. So the emotional and psychological abuse, the hidden ones, the ones that are harder to observe, running away or staying at friends' homes, fear of the dark or bedwetting, poor self-image and self-esteem, lack of trust in adults, lying or stealing for no reason, and then avoiding going home. They're just some, not one thing means that there is physical abuse, but we're developing a pattern of behaviour and a story to see if we can bring that picture together. And when you think it's met that threshold for you of suspicion, then you report that up to your line manager, follow your protocols. If your line manager doesn't take the action that you're satisfied with, then make sure that you take it outside of your organisation. Anyone can contact their state or territory children's services and do a report. If you're a holder of a Working with Children check, you have a duty of care to report that. That's your role. Says you're a fit and proper person to work with and safely work with children and young people. So indicators of sexual abuse, there's some patterns of behaviour there. Indicators of neglect. There's another video there for you to be able to watch in your own time. Some of the financial abuse, being poor is not abuse, but unstable housing because people keep breaking their lease or being breached and get evicted, lack of access to quality service can make life very difficult for some parents, but this may exacerbate their mental health and other problems. And it could be that their coping mechanism could be relationship breakdowns, substance misuse, alcoholism, or everything exploding and turning into violence. Poverty and crisis, those families, poor people do not abuse their children. because of financial hardship, that anyone under pressure, regardless of what their income is, can be the perpetrator of violence. Discrimination from certain public institutions, the haves and the have-nots. Australia used to have a lower, middle and upper class. Now Australia has upper and lower. So even working people can be homeless and still sending their kids to school. That's a housing shortage. That's not neglect. But if a parent cannot find stable accommodation or relocate to find that stable accommodation, then the matters of authority will be looking for school attendance, the upkeep of that child, letting people know that they are in unstable accommodation. But we encourage our clients to go to their local MP. Anyone that has children is a priority on that list. Do some parents lose their children during that period of time going into temporary care, like respite care, so that at least the children have somewhere to stay? That's most likely. Kinship placement is the first alternative, but at times, rather than institutions, then people may be able to have that respite. That's not a legal decision, but it means that children's services or child safety will have oversight. Most parents do not want their children to go away or put their kids in homes, but sometimes things are really difficult. So there's some case studies in your learner's guide that will just give you some information around understanding. Tonight, though, we jump straight into the assessments in our second part as well. So the role play is going to be about the impact of abuse and neglect and identifying what do we do when a young person discloses, what's our role, how do we ask those things, and then how do we report them up to our line manager. So abuse can start in utero, so before a child is born. So the parent who is carrying that child, the physical, emotional, sexual, financial, and neglect can all happen before that child is born. So the indicators of prenatal abuse are delayed prenatal care, like haven't seen the doctor, but they're pregnant for a while, physical injuries, emotional distress, substance abuse, low birth weight, premature labour, fetal distress, or fetal alcohol syndrome, where that person may be a drinker throughout their pregnancy, which will impact that child before it's born. And then once it is born, then there can be some developmental delays as well. So you'll do some research, and the place to go to research will find out about your children's rights or children's right in Australia are under the Australian Human Rights Commission. They have their very own website and the rights of children are there. Australia is a signatory to the Geneva Convention for Children's Rights as well. So empowerment is about a rights-based approach. So participation, equality and equity, and also making sure that it's strength-based and that no one person is excluded or discriminated against because they have more or less money, more or less capacity to understand, better at school, better at sport. Even favouring a child is discrimination over another one. So it's not always disadvantage. It can be actually giving a great advantage to someone. That is still discrimination in a rights-based approach. And of course, the key aspects of the United Nations. These are in your assessments. And just to recap. So we're moving into more around the legal framework, which will happen more next week, but we're following our Australian laws, the rights of a child, and then also the Geneva Convention, which is the United Nations, which is our global agreement we have. So stay tuned for part two. Part two will be run by the learners in that class. We will do the role plays. We will have some peer review and give feedback. I will provide some feedback on those role plays as well. But the self-reflection from the learners also is powerful. They're demonstrating for you what that role play would look like, except they're doing it in real time in class. But the story that they're going to be doing will be the story that you need to demonstrate in a role play for yourself. It will have two parts to it. So please stay tuned and watch part two. These are going to come out to you in recordings as a resource for you as well.